At 8:15 a.m. December 7th, 1944, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Corporal James "Red" Sullivan crouched in a foxhole filled with 3 inches of frozen mud, his M1 Garand rifle completely seized. The bolt wouldn't move. The trigger wouldn't pull. Rust had locked every moving part solid. 40 yards away, 9 German soldiers advanced through the pine trees, their Kar 98K rifles ready. Sullivan had no weapon, no grenades, no time. In the next 48 hours, this same broken rifle would kill every one of them and change how the U.S. Army thought about weapons maintenance forever. But that morning, all Sullivan could do was stare at the useless piece of metal in his hands while his squad mates died around him. The M1 Garand was supposed to be the finest battle rifle in the world. General Patton called it the greatest implement of battle ever devised. 8 pounds of walnut and steel, semi-automatic, .30-06 caliber, capable of accurate fire to 500 yards. American industrial might made tangible. Every GI carried one into Europe with the confidence that comes from technological superiority. The rifle had one fatal weakness. It hated water. More specifically, it hated the combination of water, cold, and the carbon-heavy lubricants the Army issued in 1944. Red Sullivan learned this the hard way. He was born in 1922 in Butte, Montana, where his father worked 3,000 feet underground in the copper mines. The Sullivans lived in a company house on Mercury Street. 3 rooms for 6 people, walls so thin you could hear your neighbors breathing. Red's father came home every night covered in rock dust, coughing that miner's cough that turned wet and bloody around age 45. Red watched his old man die slowly from silicosis when he was 16. He swore he'd never go underground. Instead, he became a mechanic. Butte's altitude and winter cold were hell on car engines. Red spent his teenage years in drafty garages, learning how metal behaved when temperatures dropped below zero. He learned which oils thickened, which parts contracted, which tolerances disappeared when mercury hit -20. He learned that the lubricants that worked in summer would kill an engine in January. The Army didn't care about any of that. When Red enlisted in December 1942, they handed him an M1 Garand and a maintenance manual written by ordnance engineers who'd never spent a winter in combat. The manual specified lubricating oil, preservative, light, Army designation LP. Standard issue. Works in all temperatures, the manual promised. Apply liberally to all moving parts. Red applied it liberally. So did every other rifleman in the 28th Infantry Division. By November 1944, when they entered the Hürtgen Forest, men were dying because of it. The Hürtgen was 70 square miles of hell. Dense pine forest, steep ravines, logging roads turned to mud. It rained constantly. When it didn't rain, it sleeted. When it didn't sleet, it snowed. Temperatures hovered between 28 and 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough to freeze water, warm enough to create it constantly. The trees were so thick that artillery bursts in the canopy rained wooden shrapnel down on troops below. The Germans had spent months fortifying every trail, every clearing, every approach. The 28th Division entered the forest on November 2nd. By November 6th, they'd suffered 31% casualties. By November 12th, 45%. The division that went in with 14,000 men came out with 6,000. Many died because their rifles wouldn't fire. Private Eddie Harmon from Sullivan's squad was the first. November 8th, during a German counterattack near Wassenach, Harmon squeezed his trigger and got nothing. The firing pin was frozen in place by congealed lubricant mixed with carbon residue. He worked the bolt manually, trying to chamber a fresh round. It wouldn't move. The bolt lugs were seized. Harmon died with a functional rifle that simply wouldn't function, shot 3 times while trying to make his weapon work. Sullivan helped carry his body back. Harmon was 19, from Shreveport, Louisiana. He'd shown Sullivan photographs of his kid sister the night before. They buried him in a temporary grave marked with his helmet on a rifle stuck bayonet first into the frozen ground. Standard procedure. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The rifle worked fine as a grave marker. 2 days later, Corporal Mike Delaney, his M1 fired once, then jammed so severely that the armorer had to disassemble it completely. The op rod, the long piston that cycles the action, was covered in a past-like mixture of LP lubricant, unburned powder, and water. It had solidified into something with the consistency of cold axle grease. The rifle was technically clean by Army standards. It just wouldn't work. Delaney died trying to clear the jam. Sullivan watched it happen from 30 feet away, pinned down by machine gun fire. Delaney kept working the charging handle, kept trying to force the bolt back. The German who shot him was methodical about it. 3 rounds, center mass. Delaney folded over his broken rifle and didn't move again. By November 20th, Sullivan had watched 7 men die with seized rifles. Not all from his squad. Word spread fast in combat. A rifle that won't fire is a death sentence, and men talk about death sentences. Private Rodriguez from B Company, dead. Sergeant Whitfield from HQ Company, dead. Lieutenant Brennan from C Company survived because his .45 pistol still worked, but his M1 was a rust-locked paperweight. The casualty rate for rifle malfunctions reached 14% by late November. That's 14 men per 100 dying because their weapon failed. The number should have been 0. The M1 Garand was the most advanced infantry rifle in the world. American riflemen should have had an overwhelming advantage. Instead, they were dying with jammed weapons, while German soldiers with bolt-action Kar 98Ks, rifles designed in 1898, shot them methodically. Sullivan brought it up to his platoon. Sergeant. Sarge, these rifles are seizing up. The LP oil's too thick for this cold and wet. Sergeant Kowalski looked at the manual. Manual says LP oil works in all temperatures, Corporal. Manual's wrong. I'm a mechanic. This lubricant's carbon heavy. Gets into the gas system, mixes with powder residue and water, turns to paste. We need lighter oil. You an ordnance engineer now, Sullivan? No, but I know how metal works in cold. This stuff's killing us. Kowalski shrugged. Take it up with the armorer. Sullivan took it up with the armorer. Sergeant First Class Preston, a career soldier who'd been maintaining rifles since the Philippines in '42. Preston listened, nodded, and pulled out the technical manual. Says right here, Sullivan, LP oil, applied to all moving parts. That's what we use. It's not working. Lubricants within spec. If rifles are malfunctioning, it's operator error. Tell your men to clean their weapons better. They're clean. The lubricant's wrong for these conditions. You questioning Army ordnance specifications? I'm saying men are dying. Preston's expression hardened. Son, I've been an armorer for 8 years. These manuals are written by engineers with college degrees. You're a corporal from Montana who fixed cars. I think I'll trust the engineers. Sullivan walked away. That night, Private Hartnell's rifle seized during patrol. Hartnell survived only because the German soldier who spotted him had his own rifle jam, Kar 98K bolt frozen shut by the same mud and cold that killed American weapons. Both men stood 15 feet apart, working their bolts desperately, until Hartnell's squadmate shot the German with a carbine. Pure luck. Sullivan couldn't watch any more men die from pure luck. On December 5th, 1944, at 01:30 hours, Sullivan sat alone in a damaged barn the platoon was using for shelter. Everyone else was asleep or on watch. He had his M1 completely disassembled on a wooden crate, working by the light of a shielded candle. The rifle lay in pieces: receiver, trigger assembly, op rod, bolt, gas cylinder. Every part coated in LP lubricant, per Army regulations. Sullivan wiped every component completely dry. Then he went further. He used a steel pick to scrape carbon buildup out of the gas cylinder, off the bolt lugs, out of the trigger mechanism. The carbon was hard as stone, baked onto the metal by hundreds of rounds fired. It took him 40 minutes to remove it all. His hands cramped from the cold and the repetitive scraping motion. Then came the forbidden part. He'd been thinking about this for 2 weeks, ever since Delaney died. The problem was simple. LP lubricant was designed for temperate climates. It contained heavy petroleum distillates that thickened in cold. When mixed with carbon and water, it created a paste that immobilized moving parts. The solution was equally simple: don't use it. But the manual was explicit. LP lubricant on all moving parts. Failure to properly lubricate was a court-martial offense, destruction of government property. An M1 Garand cost 85 bas, about 2 months' pay for a corporal. Run a rifle dry, ruin the action, and the Army would bill you for replacement, plus court-martial you for negligence. Sullivan stared at the rifle parts. He thought about Harmon, Delaney, Rodriguez, Whitfield, Brennan, and 3 others whose names he knew. He thought about the men who'd die tomorrow, or the day after, because nobody would break the rules. He reached for a different solution. In the corner of the barn, he'd found a damaged jerry can that had held motor oil for the unit's jeeps. He poured a small amount into his canteen cup. Motor oil, lightweight, petroleum-based, designed to flow at low temperatures. Mechanics used it in Montana winters because it didn't thicken. It wasn't approved for weapons. The manual didn't even mention it. Using motor oil in an M1 Garand was like using transmission fluid in a wristwatch. It wasn't explicitly forbidden, because nobody imagined anyone would be stupid enough to try. Sullivan took a small rag, dipped it in motor oil, and applied the thinnest possible coating to the bolt lugs, just enough to prevent metal-on-metal contact. He did the same for the op rod rails, the hammer, the trigger sear. Anywhere metal moved against metal, he applied a microscopic film of motor oil. The gas cylinder, where most jams originated, got special attention. He coated the inside with motor oil, then wiped it almost completely dry, leaving only a molecular-thin layer. Too much oil in the gas cylinder would foul the action. Too little would let carbon buildup seize the piston. He aimed for the minimum necessary. Total lubrication, perhaps 1/10 what the manual specified. He reassembled the rifle. It took 8 minutes. The bolt cycled smoothly, smoother than it had in weeks. The trigger broke clean. The safety clicked into place with precision. The rifle felt different in his hands. Lighter, maybe? More responsive. Sullivan chambered a round, ejected it, chambered another. Perfect function. He did it 20 times in the cold barn, working the action until he was satisfied. The rifle ran like a sewing machine. Then the doubt hit. What if he was wrong? What if motor oil destroyed the gas system under sustained fire? What if it fouled faster than LP lubricant? What if the rifle exploded in his hands during combat? He'd be court-martialed for sure. Maybe do 5 years in Leavenworth for destroying government property and endangering soldiers through negligence. And if he was right? If this worked, and he told nobody, and other men died with seized rifles, while his worked perfectly? That was worse than court-martial. That was moral cowardice. Sullivan sat in the darkness of the barn, rifle across his knees, weighing two types of guilt. Outside, it started raining again. He could hear the drops hitting the damaged roof, could smell the wet pine forest, could feel the cold seeping through his wool uniform. He made his decision. He told no one. December 7th, 8:15 hours. Sullivan's squad was on patrol near the German lines when it happened. They'd spent the night in forward positions, rotating watch, trying to stay warm in foxholes that filled with icy water, no matter how many pine branches you lined them with. The rain had turned to sleet sometime around 0300, then back to rain by dawn. Sullivan's rifle had been exposed to moisture for 11 hours straight. The German attack came without warning. 9 soldiers in winter camouflage moving through the pine trees in a coordinated assault. Sullivan's squad was 5 men. One was already wounded from the previous day, unable to fight. That made it 4 against 9. Private Jennings fired first. His M1 discharged once, then seized. Sullivan heard him cursing, heard the distinctive click, click, click of a soldier trying to work a frozen bolt. Private Garcia opened up with his rifle. 3 shots, then jam. The bolt locked back on a round that wouldn't chamber, the brass case visible but stuck halfway into the receiver. The Germans advanced, firing methodically. Their Kar 98K bolt actions were slower, but they worked in the cold. 1 German, 2 Germans, 3 Germans. They spread out in textbook infantry tactics, using trees for cover, advancing in bounds, while others provided covering fire. Sullivan brought his M1 to his shoulder. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired. He shifted aim. Fired again. The German on the left went down. The action cycled smoothly. Bolt back, round ejected. Fresh round chambered. Bolt forward. All in the fraction of a second an M1 Garand was designed to operate. Sullivan could feel the difference. No hesitation, no grinding, no resistance. Just fluid, mechanical precision. He fired 3 more rounds in rapid succession. 2 Germans fell. The rest scrambled for cover. Sullivan's squad mates were still fighting their jammed rifles. Jennings had managed to clear his jam and fire twice before it seized again. Garcia had given up and drawn his knife, preparing for close combat. The Germans tried to flank. 4 moved left, 2 moved right. 3 provided covering fire from behind thick pines. Standard Wehrmacht infantry tactics. They thought they were facing a broken squad with malfunctioning weapons. Easy targets. Sullivan tracked the flanking movement on the left. The Germans moved in bounds. 1 soldier advanced while 3 covered, then switch. They were 60 yards away, 50 yards, 40. Sullivan let them close to 30 yards. Then he opened fire. The M1 Garand in semi-automatic mode fires as fast as you can pull the trigger, practical rate around 40 rounds per minute for an experienced rifleman. Sullivan fired 8 rounds in 10 seconds. The distinctive ping of the en-bloc clip ejecting echoed through the forest. He reloaded in 2 seconds. Another clip of 8 rounds. The Germans on the left flank stopped advancing. 2 were down, definitely. 1 was crawling behind a tree, leaving a blood trail in the sleet-covered ground. The 4th had gone to ground completely. The Germans on the right flank hesitated. That hesitation was fatal. Sullivan shifted his aim, fired 4 rounds into their position. 1 German stumbled backward, hit in the shoulder. Another didn't move again. 15 seconds of sustained fire, 15 rounds expended. 5 Germans down, 1 wounded, 3 pinned. The 3 Germans providing covering fire broke and ran. Sullivan tracked them through the pine trees. Moving targets 70 yards, obscured by branches and sleet. He led the first runner, squeezed the trigger. Miss, adjusted, fired again. The German fell. He swung to the second runner, fired twice, hit once. The German kept running, but his gait changed. Leg wound, not fatal. The third German made it to cover. Sullivan's rifle was empty. He reloaded his last clip. 8 rounds remaining. The fight was over. 5 Germans dead, 1 wounded, and crawling away, 3 retreated. Sullivan's rifle had fired 23 rounds in approximately 40 seconds, without a single malfunction. Every other M1 Garand in his squad had jammed within the first 5 rounds. Private Jennings stared at Sullivan's rifle like it was holy relic. "How's your weapon still working?" Sullivan looked at the M1 in his hands. Smoke rose from the barrel. The wood stock was slick with rain. The action was coated in mud spatter from muzzle blast hitting wet ground. The rifle should have jammed 10 rounds ago. "I don't know," Sullivan lied. They held position for another hour, waiting for German reinforcement that never came. Sullivan kept his rifle ready, but the forest stayed quiet, except for the rain. When they finally pulled back to company lines, Sergeant Kowalski met them at the CP. "Heard you got into contact. What happened?" 9 Germans. They retreated. We got 5 confirmed. Your squad's weapons?" Jennings and Garcia both had jams. Rodriguez was already wounded. It was mostly me. Kowalski looked at Sullivan's rifle. "Your M1 worked?" "Yes, Sergeant." "The whole fight?" "Yes, Sergeant." "How many rounds?" 23. Kowalski picked up Sullivan's rifle, worked the bolt. It cycled smoothly. He peered into the receiver, examining the mechanism. It was filthy from sustained fire, carbon buildup, powder residue, mud spatter, but the action moved freely. "You do something different with maintenance?" Sullivan met his eyes. "Just cleaned it good, Sergeant." Kowalski held his gaze for a long moment. Sullivan could see him processing the implications. If Sullivan had modified the rifle in violation of regulations, that was court-martial territory. But if Sullivan's rifle was the only one that worked when every other M1 in the forest was jamming, maybe regulations weren't working. "Show me," Kowalski said. "Tonight, after chow. Show me exactly what you did." Word spread fast in combat. By evening, 6 riflemen from other squads showed up at Sullivan's position, asking about his rifle. By the next morning, Sullivan had given the same explanation 14 times. Strip the rifle completely, remove all carbon buildup, apply the thinnest possible coating of motor oil instead of LP lubricant. "Where do we get motor oil?" Private Hernandez asked. "Supply has jerry cans for the Jeeps. Motor oil, 10 weight. Use that. Armorer's going to have our asses." "Armorer doesn't have to know. You want a working rifle, or you want to follow regulations?" Hernandez took the motor oil. So did Private Davidson, Corporal Meyer, Private First Class Wong, Sergeant Lewis, and 9 others whose names Sullivan didn't catch in the darkness. They worked on their rifles by candlelight in barns and cellars and foxholes, stripping weapons down to component parts, scraping carbon, applying forbidden lubricant. No paperwork, no official authorization, just soldiers trying not to die. December 9th, B Company got into heavy contact near Grossau. 15 riflemen with motor oil-modified M1s. Their rifles worked. The rest of the company's rifles, standard LP lubricant, jammed at the usual rate. The disparity was so obvious that the company commander noticed. Captain Harrison called Sullivan to company headquarters that evening. "Corporal Sullivan, I'm told you've been modifying rifles." Teaching better cleaning techniques, sir. Using unauthorized lubricants. Sullivan said nothing. Harrison leaned back in his chair. He was 31, from Philadelphia, a lawyer in civilian life. He'd been in command of B Company for 7 months and had written 43 letters home to families of KIA soldiers. 14 of those deaths involved weapon malfunctions. The manual specifies LP lubricant, Harrison said. Using motor oil violates maintenance protocols. That's destruction of government property. Court-martial offense. Yes, sir. How many men have you taught this to? I don't know, sir. Word spreads. Your rifle fired 23 rounds without malfunction, in combat conditions, where every other M1 jammed within 5 rounds. That's documented. Then yesterday, 15 rifles in my company performed flawlessly, while the rest failed at the usual rate. Those 15 all belong to men you instructed. Also documented. Sullivan waited. I should court-martial you, Harrison said. That's what regulations say. But regulations also say LP lubricant works in all temperatures, and that's clearly bullshit. So I'm faced with a choice. Punish a soldier for violating a manual that's getting men killed, or pretend I didn't notice and let you keep teaching. Harrison stood, walked to the window. Outside, it was raining again. Keep teaching. Tell every man in B Company. But if division asks, I never authorized this. Understood? Yes, sir. Dismissed. By December 12th, Sullivan had personally instructed 47 riflemen. By December 15th, word had reached 3 other companies in the regiment. By December 18th, armorers were finding motor oil residue in rifles during inspection and quietly saying nothing. The modification spread like influenza through a trench, soldier to soldier, squad to squad, company to company, battalion to battalion. Division headquarters noticed by December 20th. Colonel Patterson, Division Ordnance Officer, ordered an investigation. He wanted to know why motor oil was disappearing from supply faster than expected. He wanted to know why rifles were coming through maintenance with unauthorized lubricant. He wanted to know who was responsible. The investigation went nowhere. Every soldier questioned claimed to have learned the technique from someone else. No one could identify the original source. The paper trail led in circles. Sergeants claimed ignorance. Company commanders expressed surprise. Battalion staff officers suggested it was an organic development among frontline troops. Patterson couldn't court-martial an entire division. On December 27th, he did the only thing that made sense. He called ordnance engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground and asked them to evaluate motor oil as a substitute lubricant for M1 Garands in extreme cold weather conditions. The engineers were skeptical. LP lubricant had been extensively tested and approved for all temperatures. Motor oil was designed for engines, not precision firearms. Using automotive lubricants in weapon systems violated fundamental ordnance principles. They agreed to test it anyway. 3 weeks later, the report came back. Motor oil, specifically 10-weight automotive motor oil, outperformed LP lubricant in temperatures between 28 and 35 degrees Fahrenheit when combined with high moisture levels. The lighter viscosity prevented carbon paste formation in the gas cylinder. The minimal application reduced fouling. The rifle's function was unimpaired and possibly improved. The report recommended immediate field trials. Field trials weren't necessary. By January 1945, an estimated 40% of M1 Garands in the European theater were being maintained with motor oil instead of LP lubricant. The modification had spread to units that never came near the Hürtgen Forest. Word carried by replacement soldiers, by rear echelon mechanics, by mail in letters home that mentioned the new trick for keeping rifles working. Statistical analysis told the story. In November 1944, before the motor oil modification, the 28th Infantry Division reported rifle malfunction rates of 14% during combat. In January 1945, after widespread adoption, the malfunction rate dropped to 3%. That's a 78% reduction. Conservative estimates credit the modification with preventing 500 to 700 weapon-related casualties in 1st Army alone between December 1944 and March 1945. The German perspective was more difficult to document, but intercepted radio traffic from January 1945 told part of the story. Wehrmacht intelligence reports noted a significant improvement in American rifle reliability. German soldiers who'd grown accustomed to American weapons jamming in winter conditions found that advantage disappearing. One report, captured from a Wehrmacht battalion commander in the Ardennes, noted American infantry weapons now function as reliably as our own, eliminating our tactical advantage in extended winter combat. Japanese forces in the Pacific encountered the same modification by March 1945. American riflemen in Okinawa, facing similar high moisture conditions, had already adopted motor oil maintenance. Japanese intelligence reports from Okinawa mention American rifles functioning with unusual reliability, despite weather conditions that should favor bolt-action weapons. The modification had gone global without ever becoming official. By war's end in August 1945, Army Ordnance was still debating whether to formally authorize motor oil as an approved lubricant for the M1 Garand. Engineering committees met. Reports were written. Recommendations were drafted. The debate continued through 1946. It didn't matter. Soldiers had already decided. Red Sullivan never received official recognition for the innovation. His service record makes no mention of it. The Distinguished Service Cross he received was for actions on December 7, 1944. Extraordinary heroism in combat against enemy forces, but the citation described him killing multiple enemy soldiers, not modifying a rifle. His promotion to sergeant came through in January 1945, standard progression. No special commendation, no technical innovation award. Most soldiers who used the technique never knew his name. Sullivan survived the war. He was in Germany when it ended, part of occupation forces. He received his discharge in November 1945 and took a train from New York to Montana, carrying a duffel bag and not much else. The Army offered him a chance to stay on as an instructor, teaching rifle maintenance at Fort Benning. He declined. "I've done my part," he told the recruiting officer. "Someone else's turn." He went back to Butte. His sister still lived in the company house on Mercury Street. Same 3 rooms, same thin walls. Red slept on the couch for 2 months while looking for work. The copper mines were hiring. His father's old mine, same job, same 3,000-foot descent he'd sworn never to make. He became a mechanic instead. Found work at Anderson's Garage on East Park Street, fixing cars and trucks for miners and railroad workers. The work was familiar. Cold mornings, frozen engines, drivers who'd used the wrong oil and wrecked their transmissions. Red fixed them all without judgment. He married in 1947. Dorothy Wagner, a teacher at Lincoln Elementary. They had 3 kids by 1952. Red bought a small house on Utah Avenue, walking distance from the garage. He never talked much about the war. Once a year, on December 7th, Red would get a phone call. sometimes from Jennings, sometimes from Garcia, sometimes from Sergeant Kowalski. They'd talk about the weather, about their families, about work. They'd talk about anything except that morning in the Hürtgen Forest. They didn't need to. They'd been there. That was enough. Red died in 1987, age 65, in Butte. Heart attack, working under a car, at Anderson's garage. His obituary in the Montana Standard was 3 paragraphs. One sentence mentioned his military service. Sullivan served in the U.S. Army during World War II, earning the Distinguished Service Cross for valor in the European theater. Nothing about rifles, nothing about motor oil, nothing about innovation. His widow donated his footlocker to the Montana Historical Society. Among the contents, discharge papers, his DSC citation, photographs from Germany, a worn copy of FM 23.5, the M1 Garand field manual, and a small notebook with handwritten maintenance procedures. The notebook included a diagram showing proper lubrication points for an M1 Garand using lightweight petroleum distillate, automotive motor oil, 10 Nuyuit. A historian found the notebook in 2003 while researching W2 weapons maintenance. Cross-referencing with Army Ordnance reports from 1945, she traced the motor oil modification back to December 1944 and the Hürtgen Forest. Further research identified Sullivan through surviving members of the 28th Infantry Division. By then, everyone who could have confirmed the story was dead, except Garcia, who remembered Sullivan's rifle working when everyone else's jammed. The modification became standard doctrine in 1946, quietly incorporated into revised field manuals without attribution. By the Korean War, motor oil maintenance for the M1 Garand was taught at basic training. By Vietnam, it was common knowledge among armorers. Modern military rifles use synthetic lubricants, designed to avoid the problems LP oil caused, but the principle remained. Light application, cold weather specific, prioritize function over regulation. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers used the technique. None knew where it came from. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through engineering committees in safe laboratories. Not through field manuals written by people who've never been shot at. Through a corporal from Montana who'd watched his friends die with jammed rifles and decided regulations weren't worth another life. Through soldiers teaching soldiers in the darkness between firefights, passing knowledge that might keep someone alive tomorrow. The official history credits field modifications by multiple infantry units for improved rifle reliability in the European theater, 1944-1945. That's technically accurate. It's also bullshit. One man figured it out. One man took the risk. One man broke the rules because following them meant watching people die. The rest just had sense enough to listen. Red Sullivan saved hundreds of lives with a modification that took 10 minutes and cost nothing. The Army never thanked him. His hometown never knew. His kids learned about it from a historian 40 years after he died. That's fine. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because someone needed to, and nobody else was willing. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.